Greetings friends at the Summary Club. Today we will talk about Buddhism, the original essence of this teaching, as well as the history of Buddhism, because as many know, Buddhism is one of the oldest religious and moral teachings on earth, which has an incredibly long history and carries in itself the wisdom, love and compassion. And yes, it is a doctrine, although many people today call it a religion, which is not quite true, but we will talk about this in more detail. And it was founded, according to legends, by Shakyamuni Buddha himself in India in the 6th century BC, or about 2500 years ago. The official history of Buddhism begins with Shakyamuni Buddha, or as he is called, the divine sage of the Shakya family, being born into a royal family in northern India. Even at birth he was given the name Siddhartha Gautama, and it was predicted that he would either become a world-famous king or a hermit and enlightened one if he saw disease, old age and death in his life. Naturally he was shielded from such factors, lest he accidentally see the sick, the old, or even more so, death. But how could such things be hidden from the prince? It was almost impossible. And of course one beautiful day, when he was already a grown man, he happened to see both a sick man and an old man, and how to see off a dead man to his last journey. And so, seeing the impermanent nature of everything, and faced with the suffering of this world, at the age of 29, Prince Gautama secretly left the kingdom of the Shakyas. For 6 years he engaged in ascetic practice, meditation, and concentrated contemplation. And then under the Bodhi tree in Bodhgaya he attained ultimate wisdom and enlightenment. The first turn of the Dharma wheel, Buddha's law wheel. At the age of 35, having attained the highest enlightenment and learned absolute happiness, Shakyamuni Buddha was, of course, eager to share the knowledge of absolute truth with all people. Thus in the history and teachings of Buddhism begins the narrative of the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma law as described in the sutra on the beginning of the turning of the wheel of the law. This sutra tells us that Shakyamuni Buddha began his first lecture on the law or Dharma at the Deer Park near Varanasi in northern India. This first lecture was for only 5 monks, later his first disciples. With these monks he once practiced perfect asceticism, but seeing no result, Shakyamuni Buddha left them to practice his way to attain enlightenment. And so after 5 years, he returned enlightened, and it was these 5 monks leading a fruitless ascetic practice that became his first disciples. Master Buddha never spoke of Buddhism in his life, just as Master Christ never spoke of Christianity. The followers of these masters simply marked the direction of the practice they were pursuing. What Shakyamuni Buddha taught was truth, or the law of truth, which is commonly referred to as Dharma. So, the first sermon of Shakyamuni Buddha was specifically for monks, in which he addresses them, the essence of this sermon being that, monks, there are 2 extremes that one who has left the worldly life should not adhere to. Which 2 extremes? It is to indulge one's passions, to become attached to objects of sensual pleasure, which is inherent in a lowly ordinary person, which is not noble and not useful. And also it is to indulge in self-torture, which is suffering, and most importantly is not noble and doesn't do much good. Monks, the middle way discovered by the Tathagata, who has attained the supreme perfect awakening, is free of these 2 extremes, opening the eyes, opening the understanding. It leads to calm, to higher wisdoms, to perfect awakening, to the attainment of nirvana. What is the middle way of Buddhism? Monks, what is the middle way that is discovered by the Tathagata, who has attained the supreme perfect awakening, and which, by opening the eyes, by opening the understanding, leads to tranquility, to higher wisdom, to perfect awakening, to the attainment of nirvana? This is the Noble Eightfold Path, namely right look, right reflection, right speech, right action, right life, right effort, right fixation in memory, right samadhi. This is what the middle way is, discovered by the Tathagata, who has attained the supreme perfect awakening, and which, by opening the eyes, by opening the understanding, leads to tranquility, to the highest wisdoms, to the perfect awakening, to the attainment of nirvana. The Eightfold Holy Way in Buddhism. Here, preaching to the monks, Shakyamuni Buddha points out that the ascetic path is no good for enlightenment, but the Eightfold Holy Path. Today in the teachings of Buddhism, The Eightfold Holy Way includes the study of the Buddha's teachings and, based on them, the ability to rightly reflect on suffering, for example, and how to destroy and eliminate that suffering. Right speech means no lying, no empty talk, no profanity, and others. Right action and life are actions directed toward the practice, toward the elimination of suffering. And right memory fixation and samadhi is the opportunity, through reflection based on truth, to understand that the whole world is suffering, the body is not me, the mind is not me, and based on other correct information, to enter right meditation and samadhi to attain enlightenment. Why were these 5 monks the first disciples of Buddha? It's because they had a certain karmic connection with the Buddha, and secondly, they really wanted to achieve enlightenment. This does not mean, of course, that there were no sermons or practices for lay followers, there were plenty of them during the Buddha's lifetime. Here, too, Shakyamuni Buddha continues his preaching with the teaching on suffering and its cessation, the now world-famous Buddhist teaching on the Four Noble Truths, which form the core of the Buddha's teaching and of all Buddhism. In this teaching, Shakyamuni Buddha reveals the essence of the suffering of this world and the ways and means of deliverance from suffering. Here in Deer Park, Shakyamuni Buddha preaches to the monks one of his most important teachings, the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth, the truth about suffering. Here, monks, is the noble truth about suffering. Birth is suffering, old age is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering. Grief, sorrow, physical and mental pain, and despair are all suffering. To be with the unloved is suffering, to be separated from the beloved is suffering, to not receive what one wants is suffering. To put it succinctly, the 5 hoardings of capture is suffering. And what is the truth or holy Dharma of the Buddha here? And the essence of the Buddha's teaching here is that this world is based on impermanence. Impermanence means that all that has been created is bound to be destroyed. Having been born, for example, a person must necessarily die. Or we have to part with someone we love because of death or other conditions. Or we have to live with those we hate. For example, you fell in love with someone and got married, but you have to live with your husband's parents. There are times when your mother-in-law or father-in-law treats you badly, but you feel sorry for your husband, you love him, or you don't want to leave this family because of the child. In other words, it is impossible to avoid suffering. And the Buddha himself says that the whole world is suffering. And what are the 5 accumulations of capture? The body, the feelings, the images, our experiences and discernment. As you can see, they are all suffering. Our body gets sick, grows old and dies. And our mind and feelings are constantly changing. And we may have pleasant images or perceptions of something, or negative ones, that we are trying to avoid. Our experience is what we know about something, but things may not match our experience and what we wish to experience based on experience. Well, discernment is our deep data or knowledge about something, when we always divide everything into likes and dislikes. We mistakenly think of birth in the human world as joy. Of course, if you pick out individual moments it may be so, but still the essence of these joys is initially suffering and trying to avoid it. Our young bodies change, those we love change too. We also have to experience physical pain or unpleasant feelings from being scolded or unfairly accused by someone. That is why it is said that the basis of this world is impermanence and suffering. And like the dew disappears, my life, another dream in the midst of sleep. A famous poem by Taiko Hideshi. The Buddha went on to say, monks, here is the noble truth about the cause of suffering. It is the thirst that leads to rebirth, which is accompanied by pleasure and attachment, aimed at obtaining pleasures here and there. It is the thirst for sensual pleasures, for existence and non-existence. And here Shakyamuni Buddha points out that the root of our suffering is attachment to pleasures that make us blind to suffering. And if desires and pleasures were constant, then suffering would not exist. But everything changes, and everything is constantly destroyed in the end. And here, monks, is the truth about the cessation of suffering. It is the cessation of lust. By the cessation of affections, it is the abandonment of lust, the giving up and liberation from it, the giving up of cravings. How do you free yourself from suffering? Shakyamuni Buddha here says that even if suffering exists, we can distance ourselves from it or free ourselves from it. This process of liberation from suffering through analysis, reflection, and meditation is called enlightenment, when all causes of suffering cease completely. Shakyamuni Buddha, in turn, meditated for a long time on the impermanent nature of all things and attained full realization and enlightenment. Because he has experienced it firsthand, he says with full confidence that it is possible to detach oneself from suffering, to distance oneself from it. And here is the monk's noble truth about the path leading to the cessation of suffering. It is the Eightfold Holy Path: right look, right thinking, right speech, right action, right life, right effort, right memory fixation, and right samadhi. This is the path that Shakyamuni Buddha suggests in the teachings and history of Buddhism to take in order to get rid of suffering and achieve liberation and enlightenment. As we can understand, it begins with the realization that this world is a suffering that already exists with our birth. Based on this, we reflect correctly, we realize the impermanence of everything in our lives, and we begin to practice accordingly with our body, speech, and thoughts. And we don't waste time, but we do proper meditation based on the facts of impermanent nature and suffering. On the basis of this correct meditation, we enter correct samadhi, which translates as a state similar to enlightenment. This doesn't mean, by the way, that this is the only way that Shakyamuni Buddha suggested for achieving enlightenment and liberation from suffering. As the Buddhists say, the Buddha stands at a crossroads, and many paths lead to enlightenment. And there is no single way to achieve it, because, as they say, everyone has different capabilities and abilities, so there are teachings in Buddhism both for monks and simpler teachings for lay followers for enlightenment and deliverance from suffering. There are many sutras and texts written down by disciples of the Buddha in which various laws or dharmas for attaining a free state of mind or for ordinary worldly happiness are outlined in more detail. After all, we are constantly faced with various difficulties and suffering in our lives, and Buddhism as a science and practice can help us in resolving our problems of sadness, heartache, and loneliness. Therefore, Buddhism is one of the greatest, and by the way popular religious teachings of the planet, is a must to study for anyone who wants to achieve a really happy life and success, not to mention enlightenment. But this is material for separate articles and videos, so stay with us at the Summary Club, develop spiritually, self-improve, watch and read more about the essence of the teaching of Buddhism, about the great wise lessons of the great enlightened sage the Buddha. And friend, don't forget to subscribe to the Summary Club for becoming more successful, educated, kinder, and wiser every day. Save hundreds of hours and dollars spending on boring regular education. Feel free to write your opinions and questions about each video. We read all the comments. In addition, go to our official website, where you can find reading materials or watch other videos on channel and links in the description. All the best.